Most people believe self-sabotage is just poor discipline, that you simply didn't want it enough, that you lacked willpower, and if you were serious, you would just do the work. But sometimes it is something else. Sometimes it is an attempt to regain control when life feels uncertain. Not control in a dramatic villain way. More like a quiet, automatic move your mind makes when the outcome feels unclear and the stakes feel personal. Picture this: you are 22. It's selection season, tryouts, rankings, interviews, exams that decide placements. Everyone is comparing, everyone is watching. One decision can change your next year. And then right when you need steadiness the most, something strange happens. You do the one thing that makes losing more likely. You delay, you overcheck, you overplan, you change the plan at the last minute. You make a choice that gives you a clean reason in advance for why it didn't work. Here's the quick proof that this topic is real and studied. Psychologists study something called intolerance of uncertainty. It's a way of describing how some people experience not knowing as real discomfort. Not a moral failure, not a personality flaw. A measurable pattern researchers discuss and measure with validated scales. Today, we're going to map how that discomfort can push a person toward what I'll call predictable losses. Not because people want to fail, but because a predictable loss can feel safer than an unpredictable outcome, and we'll do it through 5 myths that keep this cycle alive. We'll also end with a simple 7-day awareness routine. Not a treatment plan, not a diagnosis, just organizational thinking. A way to notice what your mind is doing before it makes choices for you. And I want to plant 3 open loops now so you can feel where this is going. Loop A: why does a guaranteed excuse feel safer? Loop B: why can uncertainty feel like danger? Loop C: what exactly is a control substitute? Hold those 3 questions. We're going to answer them slowly and clearly. Let's set the tone. This is not a diagnosis. It's a lens. Uncertainty is not bad. We need uncertainty to learn, to grow, to explore. If everything were known, nothing would improve. The problem is when the need for certainty becomes so strong that it quietly drives your choices. When "I don't know yet" feels so uncomfortable that you start making moves just to stop that feeling. Researchers define intolerance of uncertainty in clinical and academic work as difficulty enduring the aversive response that comes from missing information about what might happen. In plain English, not knowing can feel like a threat signal. And this matters because research discusses intolerance of uncertainty as a factor that shows up across multiple anxiety-related patterns. That does not mean you have anything. It means researchers take this seriously as a common human vulnerability. Now, because this is a documentary-style map, I'm going to use a simple nickname for a set of behaviors researchers already talk about. Researchers use terms like safety behaviors and self-handicapping in different contexts. I'm going to call many of these control substitutes. A control substitute is not a clinical term. It is our label, and it means this: a move that reduces uncertainty quickly by creating a simple story for why things went wrong, or by narrowing your options so the outcome feels less mysterious. You'll also see 2 simple visuals through the video. One is an uncertainty dial. When the dial goes up, your mind will try harder to reduce the unknown. The other is a 2-lane road. Lane 1, useful information. It helps you decide and move forward. Lane 2, endless checking. It soothes you for a moment, but it doesn't move you. Here's your first micro-win right now. If you have ever felt relief after making a bad choice, that relief is a clue. Relief often tells you what your brain was trying to protect. And keep loop A in your pocket. We will come back to why excuses feel safe. Myth 1 says, I sabotage because I'm undisciplined. This myth is heavy because it sounds like a final judgment. It makes the person the problem, and here is the fear underneath it. If I try fully and it goes badly, it says something about me. In selection season, every outcome feels like identity. If I fail, it's not just a result, it's a verdict. That is the stakes layer, not just failure, meaning. Now the truth stated calmly, sometimes this is not a discipline problem. It is a control problem. When outcomes feel unclear, the mind looks for certainty, even a bad certainty. Here's what can happen step by step in simple language. Uncertainty rises, your body tightens, your thoughts speed up, you want a fast exit. And you pick an action that creates a clean explanation, not because the action is smart, but because it reduces the discomfort of not knowing. This is where the research lens matters. Researchers define intolerance of uncertainty as difficulty enduring the aversive response to missing or incomplete information about what might happen. Again, not a label of character. A description of a reaction. And research links higher intolerance of uncertainty with indecisiveness and difficulty deciding under uncertainty. So when you look at your own I can't start moment, it may not be laziness at all. It may be a decision system under strain. Now the fear relief to control turn. Fear, if I face the unknown I might be exposed. Relief, if I create a reason the mystery shrinks. Control. Now I can predict what people will think. Here's your micro-win for this myth. Ask one simple question and listen to the first honest answer. Am I avoiding work or am I avoiding uncertainty? That one question changes the map. Because if it is uncertainty, more shame won't help, but clarity might. And notice Loop B quietly sitting in the background. Why does uncertainty sometimes feel like danger? We'll explain that later. Myth 2 says more information will fix it. This sounds responsible. It even sounds mature. The fear under it is simple. If I just learn more, I won't mess up. If I know everything, I can't be surprised. If I gather enough data, I can control the outcome. But the truth is more nuanced. Information helps when it changes decisions. But some information seeking is not about learning. It is about soothing. Researchers study information-seeking patterns in relation to intolerance of uncertainty. And the key point for our map is this. People can seek information in different ways depending on the situation and how threatening the uncertainty feels. So here's our two-lane road. Lane 1 is instrumental information. You ask a question, you get an answer, you choose the next action. Lane 2 is certainty chasing. You ask a question, you feel calm for a moment, and then the mind immediately finds a new question. The loop becomes question, temporary relief, new question. And in selection season, this can look very normal from the outside. You tell yourself, I'm preparing. You open another tab, you search for another perspective, you watch another analysis. You rewrite the plan again, but deep down the decision stays untouched because the goal has quietly shifted. It's not what should I do next. It's how can I stop feeling unsure? This is where insecurity shows up. Insecurity says, if I choose wrong, it means I'm not good enough. Explanation says, under high uncertainty, the mind can mistake more checking for more control. Practical clarity step says, use the clean test. Here is the micro-win test spoken slowly. If I got the answer right now, would I act today? If the honest answer is no, it might not be information. It might be soothing. Now we bring in the persona. They tell themselves it's a research night. It sounds responsible, but 3 hours later they have more tabs and less clarity. And here is the fear to relief to control turn. Fear, I might choose wrong. Relief. I'll just check one more thing. Control. Checking feels like control even when it delays action. Loop C is warming up here. Sometimes research becomes the control substitute. We'll define that clearly later. Myth 3 says, if I plan perfectly, I'll feel safe. The fear underneath it sounds like this. If I miss one detail, I will fail publicly. If I plan perfectly, the future can't hurt me. If I can control the plan, I can control the outcome. Now the truth. Planning is good, but perfect planning is impossible, and sometimes planning becomes a hidden form of avoidance. Here's what it can look like in the map. The uncertainty dial goes up. Planning becomes more detailed. The start time moves later. You are still working, but you are not moving. The plan becomes a comfort object, and I want to say this carefully. Planning is not the enemy. Planning is often wise. But when planning is used to remove uncertainty completely, it can become endless. Now we bring in the context proof moment. In many selection systems, sports, admissions, rankings, evaluation pressure is constant. Researchers study evaluation apprehension in educational settings. The basic idea is that being judged can change how people feel and how they perform. So if you are in a season where you feel watched, measured, ranked, the hunger for certainty makes sense. The environment turns the dial up. Here is the micro-win line for this myth. Healthy planning answers, what is next? Certainty planning asks, what if everything goes wrong? If you want a simple clarity step, it's this. Look at your next planning session and ask, did this planning produce one next action or did it produce 10 new fears? Now the fear to relief to control turn. Fear, I can't control the outcome. Relief, I can control the plan. Control. Planning feels like steering even when you're parked. And loop A is sitting right here waiting. When perfect plans fail, and they always do because reality is messy, the mind often wants a clean reason. We'll answer why that reason can feel safer. Because this is where responsible videos slow down for a moment. Some of what people call self-sabotage is not psychology at all. Sometimes you are overloaded. Sometimes you lack time, sleep, support, or clear instructions. Sometimes you're trying to do a hard job with a small budget of energy. Sometimes attention issues or anxiety disorders are in the picture. Sometimes burnout is in the picture. And sometimes more information really is needed because the task genuinely is unclear. So we are not saying this is always intolerance of uncertainty. We are saying, when you notice repeated patterns around evaluation and uncertainty, this lens can help you see the pattern without shame. Not a diagnosis, not a promise, just a map. Myth 4 says only fear of failure matters. This one is important because it changes the emotional story. The fear underneath it is not always I can't fail. Sometimes it sounds like this. I can handle failing. I can't handle not knowing. Uncertainty feels like being trapped. Now the truth stated carefully, for some people ambiguity can feel like the sharper threat. And researchers discuss related ideas like fear of the unknown alongside intolerance of uncertainty in contemporary reviews. Here's what happens in simple English. When you can't predict the outcome, the mind keeps scanning. Scanning is exhausting. You replay conversations, you imagine what others will think, you run mental simulations, you try to see the future from every angle, and then a strange thing occurs. A certain answer, good or bad, ends the scan. A bad ending hurts, but it's clear. An unclear ending keeps the scan running. This is where uncertainty can feel like danger. Not because uncertainty will literally harm you, but because uncertainty keeps the threat system switched on. It keeps you alert, and alertness is tiring. Here's your micro-win line. Your brain may prefer a bad ending over an unclear ending because unclear endings never stop. Now we pay off loop B asked. Why can uncertainty feel like danger? Here is the answer. Because uncertainty keeps you in a state of searching. Searching burns energy. Searching feels like you are exposed. And when you're already under evaluation pressure, the search can feel endless. So sometimes the mind chooses a move that ends the search, even if it ends it in the wrong direction. And here is the fear to relief to control turn. Fear. I'm stuck in the unknown. Relief. If I force an outcome, the scanning stops. Control. Even a loss can feel like control if it ends uncertainty. Myth 5 says the pattern is irrational. This myth is where shame hides. If I do this, I must be broken. If it's irrational, I can't change it. If I keep repeating it, it must be who I am. Now the truth said calmly. It can be internally logical as a short-term safety strategy. The goal is not to shame it. The goal is to see it clearly. And this is where we define loop C and loop. Let's start with loop C. Loop C asked, what exactly is a control substitute? Here is the clean definition in plain words. A control substitute is any move that quickly reduces uncertainty, even if it reduces your chances. In the research world, you'll see related ideas. Researchers discuss safety behaviors, actions people use to reduce threat or uncertainty in the moment. And psychology has also studied self-handicapping, creating or claiming obstacles that protect self-worth or manage impressions around performance outcomes. So when I say control substitute, I'm pointing to a family of moves that have been studied under different names. Again, our label, real patterns. Now let's make it concrete with the selection season persona. Sometimes they over-explain to a coach or professor, not because they want attention, because they want to reduce the risk of being misunderstood. Sometimes they pick a tougher option at the last minute, not because it's wise. Because if it goes badly, there is a reason ready-made. That was too hard, anyone would struggle. Sometimes they start too late, not because they don't care, because if the result is poor, the story becomes, I didn't really try. It becomes about time, not ability. Sometimes they refresh rankings again and again, not to learn, but to soothe the uncertainty of waiting. And if you look carefully, all of these moves have the same shape. They trade long-term outcomes for short-term certainty. Now loop A asked, why does a guaranteed excuse feel safer? Here is the answer, grounded in the self-handicapping idea. Because an excuse is a way to protect identity during evaluation. It separates the result from the self. It moves the story from this is who I am to this is what happened. In other words, the excuse is not about lying to others. Often it's about protecting yourself from the most painful interpretation. Now here is the fear to relief to control turn, and listen to how human it is. Fear. If I try fully, the result is about me. Relief. If I add a reason, the result is about the reason. Control. Now the story feels safer. This is the third insecurity to clarity moment. Insecurity says, if I fail, it proves I'm not enough. Explanation says, some people protect self-worth under evaluation by creating or claiming obstacles. Practical clarity step says, name the move without shame. Here is the micro-win line. Once you can name the substitute, it loses half its power, because it stops being me and becomes a move. And this is the quiet documentary truth. You are not watching a monster. You are watching a mind trying to feel safe under uncertainty. Now let's close this in a way that respects your intelligence. We are not claiming certainty is bad. We are not claiming one cause fits everyone. We are not diagnosing anyone. We are simply saying, when the uncertainty dial rises, the mind can reach for control substitutes. And the substitutes can look like discipline problems when they are really uncertainty problems. So here is a simple 7-day awareness routine. No big promises, just observation, just a map. Day 1, notice your uncertainty dial. When does it spike? Before feedback, before rankings, before tryouts, before a meeting with authority. Day 2. Identify your top control substitute. Is it checking? Is it overplanning? Is it over-explaining? Is it last-minute changes? Day 3, do the 2-lane test once. Ask, does this information change my next action today? If yes, it's lane 1. If no, it might be lane 2. Day 4, spot the excuse moment. The moment you feel pulled to create a reason in advance for why it might not work. Day 5, label the pattern in one sentence. Something like, this is uncertainty, not inability. Keep it simple, keep it kind. Day 6, track one return to task moment, even 2 minutes, just record it, not as a victory speech. As data, day 7, review which situations spike the dial most. That is your personal map. That is where the environment and the mind meet. Now the closing recap in 5 points spoken simply. Most people call it discipline, but sometimes it's control. Researchers use intolerance of uncertainty to describe how not knowing can feel like real discomfort. Research links higher intolerance of uncertainty with indecisiveness, and it can relate to information-seeking patterns and uncertainty-reducing behaviors. Under evaluation pressure, the uncertainty dial can rise, and control substitutes can appear: checking, overplanning, or setting up a clean reason for the outcome. And the pattern isn't stupid. It can be protective in the short term and costly in the long term, so the first step is seeing it clearly. Next time, we'll take the same map into relationships. Because control substitutes don't only show up in exams and rankings. They also show up in closeness. In texts you don't send. In apologies you rush. In distance you create, not because you don't care, but because uncertainty feels unsafe. Until then, be gentle with your mind. And be honest about what the dial is doing.